Today in this video, I'm going to step you through how to make a rope. The way that I'm going to show you can also be used for other similar models such as a wire or a cable or even a vine. One thing we do have to be mindful of is that we're not accidentally making a model that is too high poly. So what I would recommend is that you turn on your stats in your viewport. If you don't already have them on in your viewport, the way that you do this is you go underneath display, heads up display, and then you make sure that poly count is turned on so that we will be able to see how many tries and how many verts are in our scene so that we're not accidentally making something way too high poly to work in a game. So when you start making a rope or a cable or a vine, I recommend that you kind of decide which plane is it going to mostly reside on. Do you need to do it from the top? Is it mostly going to be on the top? Is it mostly going to be from the front or mostly from the side? It tends to work better if you pick one and construct it on this way and then adjust the vertices later on those other axes to give it more 3D depth. So today I'm going to build my rope on the side. And I'm going to do this using not the poly modeling tools, but the curves. We have several curve tools. I do recommend that you might want to pull up the Maya help file, the Maya website, and look at what these tools are and understand how to use them. We're not going to go through all of the tools today. In fact, I'm only going to basically use 2 of them. But there might be something useful in here for you to really get a handle of how to use curves. No pun intended, since you can do Bezier handles. If you don't want to create one from here, you can always use the create curves. And we also have the curve drop down as well that might have more options than are found here. The curve we're going to start with is this EP curve tool. And the way that this works is that we're just going to kind of click major points for our rope. And I don't want to go crazy, like we don't need to put a whole bunch of points down. And we can always add more points later. So I'm just going to kind of click and we can see that we are building our rope and it is kind of automatically giving us a nice curve to it. And when we're done, we can hit the Q key to get our selection tool and confirm that we are done placing our curve. How do we now edit this? Let's say we made a mistake and we need to move some of those things around. I recommend switching between the different types of things on here by right-clicking in your viewport and choosing them this way. You can actually click on the item itself and you can also get these, but if you're working in a scene that has a bunch of curves and poly models, it can be kind of hard to select the correct one. Like if you accidentally click on an object that is not a curve, you won't get the correct selection. So just kind of right-clicking off to the side can be a better way to do this. The first thing we can do is do edit point. And this will allow us to grab and use our move tool to move around those points we just placed. So we can easily click and drag to reselect and reposition points if we need to. Let's say though that, it's working, but the curve in between isn't quite where it needs to be. Like maybe it needs to be a little bit more dramatic or less dramatic. If we right click, we can choose control vertex instead. And what this will give us is the in-between points between vertices that we can pull and actually kind of adjust that curve, not on a point-by-point basis, but more kind of how that curve is going between those points. So we can adjust it this way to be possibly, curving closer. So you're going to be doing a little bit of, editing those direct points and then doing your control vertex to kind of change it in this way. What if you realize that you need a little bit more definition? Like, oh no, we actually needed a point here, but we didn't place a point there. The way I recommend doing this is switching to edit point and you're going to want to find areas where you want to add a point between. So let's say I need one in between here. I recommend that you select the 2 points for, that are around the one that you want to add. And then we're going to do a curves, and then we're going to do an insert knot. Those things are technically called knots. Don't just click this though. Go to the dialog box and set it to insert at between selections. So it'll insert it between these 2 points. And we can tell it, maybe you actually need to insert like 3 or 2 between those. I would recommend possibly just doing one at a time unless it is a very large span that you do need to add them to. So I'll hit apply. And then if we go back to edit points, we see we have our extra point there that we can now manipulate and get this to be closer to the shape that we need for our rope. So what do you do when you think you're pretty close and you are ready to actually do this? Well, first, I should probably go maybe to my perspective view, and I might need to tweak it then on this axis. Oops, I think I accidentally have a snap turned on. Let's see. Oh, step snap is turned on. Step snap will still work on this if you're in that. But I can adjust this now on, this. It is easier to work with curves, especially if you're new, by just kind of doing that first plane and then worrying about making it more 3D. But let's say that this is done and we are ready to actually create the rope. This is very easy. All we need to do is right click and change to object mode so that we have, we're out of that knot selection. And then underneath create, we're going to choose sweep mesh. Just select it. And it might look really awful at first, and this is okay because we can adjust it. Notice that we have now, how did I create 2? Did I do it by accident? Let's see. Should have only created 1. Let's just try it again. Create. What are the 2 that created that one? That one. I don't know. I'm just going to delete one. It created this, and we can still go in and edit this curve. I usually recommend going back to the curve and then coming underneath your attribute editor and finding the sweep mesh creator node. And what we can do with this is we can kind of control the look now of that sweep. So for instance, we probably don't need this to be 8 sides, so we can drop this down to maybe like a 6-sided. If you were actually making a really thick rope, you would probably want to keep it up at 8. But remember, this is going to affect our poly count. So let me jump that up to 8 again. If we look at our sweep, it is at 368 tries. If we drop it down to 6, we are down to 276 tries. So it is quite a bit of savings by just dropping it down. Underneath, let's see. Where are we looking? Oh, there we go. Transformation. This is where we can really control the look of it. So it's way too thick. I can make it a lot skinnier. I can also add more precision to this. If I made this actually pretty small, since these are centimeters. This is a pretty small rope, so I would need to bump up that precision a little bit. Unfortunately, it is raising my try count, but we can adjust that later. So again, we can scale it. We can do a rotate. We don't really need to do that for what we're doing though. We probably should just kind of keep it as is. We can twist it. Again, probably not for anything we're doing. We really don't need to twist it. We can taper it, and this would be useful if we're trying to make something like a vine or something. Let's make it a little bit thicker, where it kind of starts thick and then it kind of organically tapers down to nothing, or like a tail. This would work really well for a tail. Oops, let's set that back to 1. Let's drop this down. You can do a curve with that taper as well. So if you did need it to get thicker, thinner along that curve, you could do it differently. So let's turn on our edges and let's see how it's going. If we click this one, we can see that this is way too many edges. One of the ways that we can fix this with kind of still keeping some of that definition, well, we could drop that definition down a little bit. It doesn't need to be quite so nice. Maybe something like that. Is we can click this optimize. So we're at 972 tries. If we hit optimize, it cut it out. One of the bigger issues is I did make this really small. So let me make this bigger. Let me just use that scale tool real quick. Whoops. Use that scale tool. We're going to just make this to a more reasonable size. We don't need to make a thread that was basically at thread size. So let's make it larger. And let's freeze its transform to clear that out. And we can do it again. So this will be a good, we'll step through that again. So we have our curve, create, sweep mesh. Now, yeah, this is closer to a better size. So we can drop our precision way down, but we can also jump that scale profile up because it is a lot bigger now. So we're dropping that precision down to something reasonable, but then we can click optimize. And we can get something a little bit closer. So we're at 944 tries. It's a little bit better. Still a little high. I would probably want to come in and maybe tweak it. So the nice thing too is if you decide like, you know what, I really messed this up. This curve actually needs to be a bit bigger. It's too small. We can still go back to our curve and we can right click and do our edit points, and we can come in and adjust this after the fact. So I can decide, that was way too small of a curve around there, or it's going into an object. Let's fix this. Maybe there's a detail down here where it's kind of going through the box or something. We actually need to make this a little bit, and notice it is kind of auto updating. So we could tweak this as needed. We can even add extra points in here. Now, actually, what if it's like, oh no, it shouldn't be pointed that way. It's got to go this way. Got a little weird though. We have to go slower. Maybe a rotate. Nope, won't let me rotate. I guess we can't make too grandiose of a change because we get that. I'd probably actually then just delete this and resweep it. Create sweep mesh. Oh, I'm still mad about that. I'll probably fix it afterwards then if it's having a problem like that. You could always try tweaking it. Let's see if we mess with the rotate. No, it's just mad about that. I'd probably just fix it after the fact or just delete it. Let's put it back to where it was. Okay, so we have our curve. Once you're satisfied, the next step would be to unwrap this. And you're probably thinking, man, that's going to be really not fun to unwrap. The good news is if you look right here, we have a UV drop down and it says create UVs unfold. So let's take a look at what this actually looks like. So did it create UVs for us? Yes, it did. It created nice, well scaled uniform UVs. So if we turn this on so that we can see it, and let me scale, I'm going to scale those UVs up bigger so you can really see those checkerboards. We can see that they are very clean. They are as unstretched as you possibly can. You might get some distortion maybe around your bigger curves, but that's okay. We can't do much about it. This is the kind of unwrap you'd want to use so that you could place a rope or other texture on it, because you could just make a tileable one and just have it kind of go, tiled nicely along it. If you, for some reason, end up losing that unwrap or you forgot to do it, you can always go through the process that I showed in the soda can video, where you go through the whole, always lose that tool. Is it the unitize, where you select all the faces, unitize them, deselect certain edges and then reattach them, and then you do your optimize on just the one U or V axis. That's the same way you would unwrap this if you've messed this up and you had to re-unwrap it. So hopefully this was useful to you. Again, ropes, super easy. Be very careful of your triangle count though. It's very, make sure you keep that up. If you are done with your curve, make sure you can just delete that. Do not attach it to your model. Do make sure that you also do your delete all history. Let's go back to modeling. Freeze your transform, delete your history, so that you are good to go with that rope.